What's going on, everybody? How's it going? I am outside of my studio because lots of stuff's going on in the studio right now. So it's a beautiful day. It was really foggy outside earlier, but now it's pretty chill. So I figured I'd just come outside and just talk with you all and just provide an update on what's going on in my world. Hi, Janine. On a beach somewhere. What's going on, Tammy? I'm just outside the studio. It's kind of noisy. Maybe I'll put the other headphone in as well. Michelle Orth. What's going on, everybody? Sorry it's noisy. I'm kind of just sitting outside. Studio's kind of busy right now, and I didn't feel like kicking everyone out. It's easier for me to just move around. And yeah, what's going on with everybody? Not too many of my Pilates people in the space right now. As you all know, I was elected, successful in my campaign that I've been running for the last 18 months, not 5 months, but 18 months. So I am officially city councilor for Meadowvale, Central Erin Mills, Mississauga. So that's pretty crazy. And that means I have to make some transitions to a lot of the work that I do, scaling back my business, scaling back these conversations, and shifting my gaze towards our community. That's something that I've always had a balance of. And it's really interesting how, like, I'm reflecting on my life and how I've looked at things, and there's always this overlap where I'm doing one thing, and I just realized I spelled proving an update. It's just meant to say providing. I don't know if I can edit that. Nope. So you gotta watch my thing there. Too funny. Alright. Anywho. So this is where we're at. Doing these lives, and I've really been enjoying them. And I don't know if Misty's even going to be in the chat today or not. So we'll just make this a real quick one. I have to look at what I'm doing with my business over the next week. We've had this focus on a global conversation and then moving to hyper-local conversation. So what's going on, Misty? I'll explain why I'm outside right now. I'll bring you on to the chat. Oh, decline. When you're ready, give me a thumbs up. Wow, it's really nice out here. Cool. Anyway, so that being said, so now we're in another transition where we're overlapping. I went from community work to fitness, did fitness for like 20 years with some community work woven into there. And now I'm flipping it over. I'm going to be like community work with some fitness. And I never let one go because, as I'm sure it's the same for all of you, this is what we do, right? Like, this is a question of who I am as opposed to what I do. And so all these pieces will always have some element of expression within me. I love using silence, except for when there's like trucks driving by and stuff. But I'm not afraid of that silence to just talk and just like chill with it. So who all is here? Always curious. I've just been kind of out of the loop with what's going on in the Pilates space. If there's any like online classes or workshops or workouts, conferences, things along those lines that are coming up, I'd love to hear from you all, see what's going on there, and just get updates from you all as well. Misty, just give me a thumbs up or ready when you're ready. Michelle, looking forward to connecting with you at the region next week. Tammy's how the conference is, how the workout's going. After this conversation, I'm going up to City Hall. I'm going to check out my office. Might take some pictures. I'm not sure how much of that stuff I can do. That's so funny. So curious. And Michelle, what department do you work in? This is weird doing this on a Friday now. Plank and paint. Oh yeah, that's right. That's so good. Well, Tammy, if you want to join me, while we're waiting for Misty, let's talk about your Plank and Pink, any other fundraisers that are coming up, corporate services. Nice. Learned all about corporate services yesterday in our talk with the city. Cool. Let's get Tammy on here. Good. Misty will join us as well.
Good morning.
Hey.
I'm going to shut that light off behind me and turn another one on. I feel like I'm glaring.
Cool.
Yeah, that's better. So I have to share with you something because it was, so I was listening to you on a podcast one day when you were talking about challenges. And
Yes.
I had already put out that I was going to do 30, it wasn't really a challenge, but I was going to do Plank and Pink for 31 days.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how many times during that month that I thought about you because you said, you know, a 5-day one, a 7-day one, but 31 days was a lot of commitment on my part. But I learned a lot.
Okay.
I learned a whole lot.
Like character development, learned a lot.
Actually, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here and tell you it was kind of twofold. I did it to bring awareness to breast cancer, but I also did it to get make me be more comfortable in front of the camera doing exercises. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So by the time I was all done with it, I feel a lot better, confident, more like that I'm going to start showing up regularly, doing something, whether it's a reel or doing something. So, but I made a lot of contacts through the breast cancer community, and I have, I just posted in my stories right now, there's a brochure that I have in the makings, and it's for breast cancer survivors, but breast cancer doctors, nurse practitioners, and organizations have reached out to me, and they're like, we need something. So I put together a brochure. So it's brought a lot of definitely pulled in a lot of different people that I wasn't expecting. So
there you go.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So
everyone, I just love watching the evolution of your business and the evolution of everyone's business. But like, it's still so fun to just watch your journey.
Yeah. I do want to show you, and I'm going to try and step back, but Stephen from Seed for Greatness partnered with me. And he donated money from his sweatshirts to Core Compassion Project, which is Jill Henson. And I now own a Seed for Greatness shirt that I asked him, and it's pink, and it's what I wanted. So I'll take a picture of it later, and I'm going to post it for him. But I was really excited that he like customized, and this is one of his new logos as well. So I was very, so I was really, really excited. So, but I'm still not done with my trauma work. And yesterday, actually Wednesday, I did Embracing Change, Talking Through Trauma. And Martin, I've watched you, and I'm just going to say this, where you've taken yours, and it's been Embracing Change now is over a year old. So Allie and Misty were both with me.
Amazing.
And it was an amazing conversation. Amazing. So I honestly, I don't know where it's going to go. It's not going away, but I don't know what it's going to look like. So I kind of have some feathers in my back pocket for the beginning of the new year with it. So
awesome.
But I have to say, and I'm not going to, it's going to be contained here, but I have some happy family things that I have to take care of during the month of November. So your people are going to see me, but trauma-informed stuff is not going away. I'm just going to continually post about it. So, but I've tried to kind of narrow it in because I've needed to help with my daughters. So.
Okay. So I'm going to bring Misty on here just on the
please
overlapper.
Do.
Yeah, it's always fun. Get her in. Fit for the call. Hello.
Hi, Misty.
Hello, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay. Can you hear me okay? I was having sound problems earlier.
I
Good.
I can.
Yay.
Yeah, you're
Good.
good.
Yay.
Nice. So, yeah, no, so your trauma informed work through November.
It right now I'm going to focus it on, like, I have all my speakers lined up through the middle of December. And so I mean, we're
Okay.
just going to pick aspects of the embracing change, and like Allie and I had a very deep conversation around a podcast that she watched and then I watched it, and it was around, I know I'm going to mispronounce this word because I always do. Miss Hold on. Let me see if I can remember it. There's a word and it describes violence against women. Help me out.
Misogyny.
Yes,
Misogyny?
yes, thank you. And it was a very enlightening conversation, and it was just really it just brought things to a different light. So I'm just trying to still keep it under, like the bringing the focus back to, talking about trauma, and that we're all like we're all affected by it, and it doesn't have to be anything we're afraid of. It's just having conversations and making it, I don't want to ever say that it's normalized, but it's just like, I don't know. Missy, you were on for just a hot minute with us. What you say?
What I really liked about the conversation, it was just that you guys have taken all of the vastness that you've had in your thoughts and your feelings, and you've brought them down to a narrow, but I think more far-reaching focus.
Mm-hmm.
And you've used this time to really hone your message, and now you're pushing your messages forward. Allie's gone back to school, and
Mm-hmm.
you have really worked hard to develop your business, and we need all of the pieces.
Yeah.
We need people that are ready and willing to stay out in that arena and do the work, so that as many people as possible can benefit from people that are willing to have the conversations. And I think
Yes.
that's what I got out of it.
So and thank you. I really appreciate that, because I have, Ellie and we still have these same thought train. I mean, we're both on the trajectory with trauma, but I think that we're a little bit different, but they still blend very, very well together. I've done extensive training this past, I would say probably a year and a half, with having a better understanding of the nervous system and how the nervous system impacts our whole body, specifically like the trauma pieces of it. And so with that being said, I've actually developed a tool. I'm not calling it an assessment. It's a screening tool for people to actually look at their clients. And it's not it's a good thing. So it's teaching people, like, what does trauma look like in the body, and what things that they can look for,
Good.
and yeah. So anyways, and that'll probably be, I mean, it's done. I just have had to tweak it, and I just need to roll it out a little bit more. So I talked about it in September, and it just kind of, it's evolved. So.
Well, Tammy, actually, I'd be curious, and just for the audience too, can you talk about where your work and Allie's work intersect? Like, where is it very similar, and where is it unique? Like, what part of it is your signature? What part is her signature? What part of it is something where both of you are like really overlapping in terms of
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Allie is more somatics, and she talks about like the developmental stages, like from birth forward. I have a strong background in the whole like birth process, but I'm coming at it more from a nervous system approach. I'm also approaching it from a movement perspective. And when I say movement, this is something that can be used for Pilates teachers, yoga teachers, or like even personal trainers. And so it's like taking exercises and then saying, okay, these are the things, like, I don't know, let's just say a lot of times people who've been affected by trauma might have issues with balance. And it's like, what can we do? And you take the modality that you're working in, whether it's yoga or Pilates, and we apply those exercises in that framework. I think that, Ellie is actually, and she's actually working with a psychiatrist right now, working with clients in her studio And honestly, what I did earlier this year is I actually partnered with, in our area where I live, with a court system, and they actually have a mental health court, and I was working with teens and doing Zoom sessions with Pilates over Zoom. And the thing is Allie has a two-way, like a release, so they can talk to each other. I did not. I was going in with they have had trauma, and I just would watch their body, and it was very individualized. So I was working with them one-on-one, not in the studio. I was doing it via Zoom. So, and it was amazing to see the differences in how they worked over. I had one girl actually stayed with, she stayed for like a long, like 20 sessions. I worked with her, and you know, you've got kids that are teenagers, and so you have to keep the focus and trying to do things. And she was younger. When I say younger, she was. But anyways, I think that there's a lot of really good things that are happening. I have girls that I have trained now, and they're actually taking Pilates and going into like the mental health aspects of it. One of my client, she's my student, so she's doing advanced work with me now, but she's working with counselors in Florida to develop a program to work with them and intersect the Pilates with it. So my hope and my goal is to let this reach out to everybody in all communities, not just Pilates, because I still think that it's something that, you know, and if people don't want to know, I mean, I'll go into deep work with them on nervous system work, but there's a lot of layers to working with the nervous system, a lot.
I think that comes back to Misty's point about the way that both of you kind of like made your message more palatable. Like, it's such a vast, scary frontier, and you're finding pieces that connect with people and introducing the world to this corner of movement, right? And I think that's great. So that's why I like giving this some airtime, because it really is. It was foreign to me, absolutely foreign to me when we first started talking, Tammy.
And you know, I know, and I remember like my first conversations with you, and you opened so many like when I say doors, I mean just mental doors of things to think about and how to approach it. And you know, through your our off-air comments to me were gentle, but they were persuading, meaning you need to do, and I did what you suggested, and it's like it's paid off, and and Misty was a part of that, and Misty knows we're not going to go too deep into that part of the conversation, but it's really been very helpful and very growing for me as a professional, but also in how I teach this approach. I mean, I've taught trauma for many years, and in the beginning, I think I kept what I taught at the college level in Pilates, I kept them separate.
Yes.
And I haven't. So this tool that I'm talking about, Reed or Martin, I actually took thoughts from when I would have been observing children, and I've applied it to adults.
Yes.
And it's intersected, and it's a way that it's just enough. I mean, because when you think about children, and I'm going to stop talking about this here after this. When you think about children who are young and they're having issues with balance, let's just use balance. And there's all these strategies that I was teaching teachers how to do. And these were all traumatized children, to teaching them how to get children's balance so they were walking more steadily and they were running and they were developing their motor skills. Now, fast forward, now you've got adults, maybe aging adults, who've gone through trauma, but yet they're not necessarily going to be thinking they've gone through trauma. And they're having all kinds of issues with their balance, all kinds of issues with other things that could be related back to trauma. And I've applied those same kind of skills, like we don't even talk about, like cross-body movements are so essential to connect the brain and do all kinds of stuff. And that's just one tiny example.
I have a few people in the chat here who are Shannon Pecor. I think Alon's still here. Two people from my area. And I just realized that you two would be great to bounce a completely different topic off of. From your social work perspective, from your social commentary, just on Worldview Misty, both of you are really brilliant. So we had...
So,
yes.
I'm sorry, continue. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt, excuse me.
No, it's okay, it's all good. We unfortunately had another shooting in my area. And this is something, as I put on my resident hat and as I put on my activist hat, and now elected official hat I had to put on as well, and say, you know, there's been some kind of violent act every 2 months almost in this area. The last, not that one's worse than the other, but like, it's just crazy how there's so many things that are happening. And my experience with the shooting that happened 2 days ago is I walked up to the scene. This is at like 11 o'clock at night, and walked up to the scene. And as they were walking me away from the crime scene because I had breached some line, I was walking back, and there was a guy sitting on the curb that they were talking with. The gentleman that they had on the curb was a witness to everything that happened. And as I was walking back, I recognized that I know him. He was one of the kids that used to be a drop-in kid back in the day. So he had walked up on the scene. I won't get into details of it, but needless to say, he wasn't guilty. He wasn't in the wrong because he was still sitting on the curb. He wasn't in cuffs sitting in a police car, but the police didn't know what to do with him. He didn't want to go in the car. He didn't want to go down to a police station. He didn't trust what was going to happen to him next. He also, a layer in, didn't want to disappoint his parents. And they heard that he was with the police and that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and all these different things. He was having a traumatic experience, sitting on the curb, replaying over and over again and verbalizing what he saw. And he was stuck sitting right there.
Yeah.
Talk about trauma. Talk about just a social commentary of where we're at. And it was crazy. I don't want to, I'm being very careful with my words because I don't want to criticize the police on how they handled it.
No.
Nor glorify the mental health aspect of it. But it's just crazy how in that moment I had on my therapy hat, you know, and just sitting on the curb with this guy. And he couldn't move, and the police didn't like. It could have gone so sideways if he got violent, if they tried to move him. You know what I mean?
And if they didn't recognize the fact that if he did get violent, that's a trauma response to being in a situation that, you know, as a kid he may have never been in before. He's not able to process. And so it's overwhelming. And, you know, in the United States, I mean, he'd be toast, to be honest. But, you know, it's what you're saying is so important because this idea, we're talking about trauma and recognizing it in the Pilates studio. If we recognize that we have to start paying more attention to this, then think about law enforcement and all of these other arenas where, you know, these are people that are at first touch, at first response with people.
Yeah.
They've got to get into the program as well. And, you know, I don't know why there's such, and you're in Canada, so I don't know what's going on there. But here, it's such a big conversation because nobody feels like this needs, I don't want to say no one. A lot of people feels like, well, you know, period, just figure it out. And that's why we're in the malaise that we're in. Yeah.
Well, sorry, Tammy, if I can just jump in for a quick second. I wanted to just paint a picture for both of you for Canada and what this looks like. In Peel, there's a gentleman who is an officer who was on I do like a weekly community show. And he was talking about the community health and well-being component of the Peel Police, where they have a mental health professional who will come out to calls when there's specific calls. Right? So if they recognize it's not going to be a violent call, this person can come out, they can de-escalate, and it's fantastic. In this situation, this would not have been a situation where they would have came because it was a shooting. It was a gruesome, violent shooting. So they would have left this person at home, except this gentleman sitting on the side of the road who saw it all, and they wanted information on what he knew and who was there and who does he know. That's when that person, I asked, where's the mental health professional? And they're like, they're on a different ship. Like, they didn't have an answer for me.
But my point, and I'm just going to be very clear,
Sure.
is that communities need to look at everybody, especially medical, like the police force. Look at being trauma informed.
Yes.
And I actually am going to say that one of the things that that I've talked about, even like in relation to the studios, it's like one person can be trauma informed, but really in reality, it's the studios need to be trauma informed. I think that the work that I'm doing could easily be scaled to have an understanding of what it's like to be traumatized, and then things that they can look for I don't want to use the word bodies. They can look for in individuals. Like that young man, he was probably in a freeze state.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and sometimes, they want to have conversations right then, but really in reality, what they need to do is just sit for a few minutes, just to kind of like allow their nervous system to like, it's not going to go away, but to allow them to like feel safe and grounded, because that's the first thing that I'm so sorry your community experienced that. It just, because I live in a community where there's been lots of violence. And that's how I ended up working with the traumatized mothers and children. And that's where a big piece of and I was like literally on the front lines, Martin, not like you are or what that was, but that's where a lot of my experiences come from. And so
yeah. They are talking about it a lot, but I'm so glad. And for those of you who live in my area know, like, I don't play with this stuff. Like, this is so central for me. And so for me to be there at midnight on a Wednesday night in the middle of a crime scene, sitting on the curb and watching how our police navigate a mental health crisis that someone's going through, a few of them knew what they were doing. A lot of them were overcrowding him, standing over him to ask gentle questions from the wrong position. Basically like, why don't you sit down on the curb beside him and ask those same questions?
Right. Standing over somebody is just like 101. That's
right. It's 101. But in that moment, they are scattered. The person was still on the loose who did the shooting. Like, it was frantic.
Yeah.
So I can't expect them to have the presence of mind, but I can expect them to have someone who is like 1 degree removed to be able to at least call the shots, point direction, and honestly, that's what I was doing. Sit down. You guys go away. How about this is the person you trust. So let's talk to him. How about you give me a minute with him? Like, I was legit just being like a safe person for this guy in this moment while the police tried to sort out what they do. And for those of you who are watching, I'll give you how the story ended. The guy, they wanted to take him down to the division. By time the two officers, the 2-point people were fantastic, and he really built a rapport with them. And eventually it came to a point where they finished by saying, "We believe what you have to say. Let's just take you home. I'll talk to your parents if you want. We'll take you in this unmarked car and we'll be good." And I went with them. Like, I said, like, I don't care if it's not protocol. I'm just gonna stay with them. And we all got in this minivan together.
Yay.
Drove him home, and then at one point when we got to his house, he asked, for another smoke. So him and the main officer just kind of stand outside. I sat outside. I sat in the car, just yapped with the other 2 officers. Him and the one officer talked. They walked over, dropped him off, and drove back. So it turned out good. And I'm frozen by the fact that this could have been that story of, a young man, was aggressive with the police, was shot, was tasered, whatever. And we know that he was going through a trauma experience, and there's just no headspace, no capacity to deal with it. So this was a happy ending, for this kid, but I've seen that was enough data for me to recognize what happens on every call when there's that much chaos.
Wow.
Because I felt the chaos that the police were going through in that moment. So I have so much compassion for them in that moment. And I also see how some guys passed the test and others flat out didn't.
Right. Wow. That's huge, Martin. And I think it's really something that could grow into other things. And, you know, just talking about what Tammy is doing as a lay person and what you're doing as a lay person. Can you imagine if you guys were to just sit and think about what can be taken to a law enforcement setting as an example, and say, these are the things to look for. This is now, not saying that everyone's going to get it, because some people just really don't give a crap, but if you put it together in a way, in a package that they at least can recognize in their own body, in their own perspectives, so that it's not just so much about law and order, it's about calming the disorder that occurs in a setting that's so chaotic that nobody's paying attention to the person that's harmed or that's been harmed or can be harmed worse.
Right.
The other piece, Martin, how are you dealing with this today?
That's a good question. I appreciate that.
Great question.
I'm feeling good. I feel like I'm still squarely focused on, I want to have a debriefing conversation with some of the officers. Like, I just took contemporaneous notes afterwards, just like caught everything, just downloaded it onto a piece of paper so I can go on with my week, so that we can continue the conversation without me having to be like, what happened next? And then what happened then? So I just wrote everything down afterwards. I've talked to one of the chiefs, one of the inspectors who work in my area, and I want to continue this conversation. Like, I think that this is something that is going to continue because it just needs to be reformed. It needs to be something that needs to be looked at. And just having that lens on it that I got from that moment, it gives me so much credibility to be able to speak to it. Because you can't give me you don't know what it's like. Because I was like, actually, I was there.
Yeah. And when you see like how they respond, but the other pieces to it that I think is really, I'm just going to say this, is it's called vicarious trauma. So so like how you witnessed it, or even though it wasn't an act of violence against you, it's the vicarious trauma. But even for the officers, and what kind of support do the officers have in being supported, that were on the scene and saw all of this stuff? It is just so critically important. You know, when you think about like all of the incident rates of the climbing of the mental health, and this is one of the things that, you know, especially for law enforcement and even nurses in the hospitals are just, it's just, I think it's something that we really, I guess I would have to speak on behalf of US, but it's just something that we really have to begin to have conversations around. And they're hard conversations. Like the conversation that Ellie and I had the other day was a hard conversation, but the only way these things are going to come out in the open is to have hard conversations.
Just like anything else that has been ignored or not understood, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. You don't get, I mean, there's friction everywhere. Yeah. There are always going to be the people that, for whatever reason, can't believe, won't believe, choose to disbelieve. But those voices that are in the know have to be stronger and more persistent, I think, than the ones that are saying no but can't substantiate why.
And I need to add to the two officers who did really well in the middle of this trauma and navigating this situation. One of the officers was one of the first people to respond to the last shooting of that police officer in the Tim Hortons.
And so you have to then wonder, at least the first thing I wonder is, how is this person being taken care of?
Yeah.
So I think that you wonder why people in law enforcement get hardened. You wonder why, you know, they get to a point where they look at a kid sitting on the ground and they're not computing that this kid's just been through something. Well, if they're going from trauma to
Trauma to trauma.
disaster to the, the next
Yep.
maelstrom over and over again, your brain is always going to create a way to protect itself and defend itself from all of
Yes.
that stimulus. And,
Well,
again,
sorry,
we know this. So why aren't we applying it to our first responders? So I'm not even just talking about the police officers. I'm talking about
No.
firemen and fire
Yes.
people. I'm
Yes.
talking about EMS, everything.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
those two guys, I think because they had seen it before and so recently, their thoughts were organized. They were very patient. They weren't in a rush. Didn't matter that it was cold outside. Like those were the two. The one guy who was the first responder at the last situation. He was probably one of the calmest people in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Super patient. Like even just the fact that he gave me time with this guy. Like this guy could, like, he was just walked away, let me sit with him, gave me time, like just let me manage the situation. Like, it's deferred. Like, and he was there, and that was a long day for him. He got there, like, that was probably his 15 or 16 hour on the day, right? Like, trying to go home, and next thing you know, we're in the middle of a 4-hour craziness. And so I wrote down the vicarious trauma. I'm gonna run with that phrase, because that really is what we were looking at in the middle of that situation.
Yeah. And I just want to say too, if you have trouble wrapping your mind around that from the law enforcement perspective, think about like when a baby cries, right? If it's your baby and you're used to your baby crying all the time, if you've got one of those babies, you get used to it. And so it's not the dumpster fire every time this kid starts wailing. For somebody on the outside, anytime they wail, it might be hyper stimulating. I might be talking about myself. But the parent becomes less sensitized to that action. Think about how that looks in a dramatic, high intensity situation. In some ways, that is a good thing, because that means you can handle things and adapt. But it also means that you are triaging, so you're not looking at the things that are less critical, and that is the person sitting on the sidewalk.
Yes.
Tammy, you want to say something?
I do. And I was trying to figure out a way to frame it. A lot of times, so there's a saying, and it talks about like, let's just use a child, or now this child is growing up. So as an infant, this child's needs weren't always met. And so they already have a dysregulated nervous system, which means that they're going to be quick to anger, quick to defend, quick to do all kinds, and very impulsive, a lot of different things. And when you've got other people like the law enforcement, like I'm just going to say, their nervous systems are also dysregulated. You can't create I'm so glad that you were there, because you brought that sense of safety. But when you've got two sets of people that are dysregulated, they're not going to solve a thing, and it's only going to like explode or get even higher. And it's understanding the engagement with the nervous system is just, I'm just going to come back to it, because it's something that people can be aware of by presenting a different demeanor, different social engagement with, like how you did. You socially engaged with him on a much calmer level to help him process whatever was going on internally with him as well. So, yeah.
Right.
Again, your community's lucky to have you, Mr. Reed.
Yeah, I'm just like blown away at the stuff that you're doing. And I'm going to just say, Martin, Allie said to me probably about a week ago, because she said, I didn't know you had a degree so I have a degree in family life education, which is very, very close to social work. But then I also have a master's in early childhood education. And I think, honestly, for me, blending the two of those together has been probably the biggest asset for me, because advocacy is the area. So I'm not in a counseling position like you or Allie would. Well, Allie eventually will be, but it's it's having the awareness and understanding of how it impacts children, teens, and adults, and then ultimately us as adults as well. So,
Yes.
and it's, so that's why maybe now when you hear me say trauma informed movement, it's not just the Pilates community that I want to talk to. I want to talk to people like community based people. I actually got invited to do a wellness training for a nonprofit organization and talk about this kind of stuff right here. And
Yep.
so, yeah.
Keep it going. Keep the conversations going, Tammy, because
Yes.
we need people in this world who aren't afraid to talk about the things that aren't pretty.
Well, and I just think it's something that for so long people, a few weeks ago, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I put a post out and I talked about like people are wearing masks and you begin to peel yourself, you begin to peel the mask off, and you can continually always sugarcoat things, but until you take that last mask off and say, okay, here I am, the authentic.
Yes.
It's having a voice, and it's having and knowing, understanding that we all have gone through trauma, and it's so important because, but it's not just our generation. It's like it goes back and it seeps back into so many, like there's just so much of it. And I'm just I'm just advocate. I'm adamant is what the word I wanted to use. It's just that it's something that needs to be brought out into the light. So
Right.
Absolutely. It's I'm gonna end the conversation a little bit earlier. Just I need to process some of this stuff, but I think it's funny how we talk about movement, and I was gonna say it's like this cute little double entendre, but it's more than that. It's a triple entendre, because it's movement, but then it's like this emotional movement, not just physical movement, but this spiritual, emotional movement. But then it's also a movement.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where now people are recognizing that there needs to be a layer of trauma informed to everything that we're doing. So we're just moving from physical movement to emotional movement. So that's all nice and cute, but then there's also a movement in general where everyone's now starting to layer this into everything they do. Because we opened with the conversation about Pilates, but now honestly we're saying, like, you know, the way we do Pilates is the way we do life.
But
I just saw that. You know, this is life.
I'm just going to touch briefly, but what I did was I took trauma informed care and added on to the layers with it, and added in extra stuff that we don't talk about, like creating a sense of belonging or the language around things, and how that is just so critically important. So
it's a helix, you know. If you just think about it, like if you think about what what DNA looks like.
Yeah.
And when you take a chunk out of DNA, you have issues. Things don't function and flow well. And so we can't just look at the idea of movement and say, oh, well, you know what? You're going to have a better life if you just look at the movement. Or you're going to have a better life if you just look at the body in front of you. It's not that. It has got to be this continuum, this helix of growth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because if you try to compartmentalize it, what you're going to have is dysfunction. Because even if you're able to offload pieces of the missing part or parts of the missing piece onto the other sections, those sections were not developed or created to manage that offloaded piece.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if we know that it works that way down to a molecular and cellular structure, why wouldn't it work that way in terms of consciousness, in terms of movement, all of these things? It comes together.
Yeah.
We have to stop. You know, it's just like there's all this research saying animals feel now, and animals suddenly know they have emotions and they take care of each other. Well, why wouldn't they? The fact that this is the way we've decided that it was doesn't mean that that's the truth. And so as we're learning more, we can potentially change how we affect their lives and vice versa. And it all comes back to collective consciousness for me.
Yeah.
If we do better, if we can be better individually, we can be better as a whole. And if we're better as a whole, we can be better as just global citizens and communities and all the way down.
Yeah. And I think I would just say that, we're working with people and having an awareness. And to me, this conversation is equally as important as understanding anatomy. And actually, to me personally, it goes deeper than anatomy. I mean, Allie's going deeper than that, but I'm saying the nervous system and how trauma impacts the whole body and how it impacts illnesses and how it impacts, Martin, we could stay another 20 minutes. I'm not going to go there, but I'm just
Martin's
saying,
trying to leave.
I know he is. And that's why
I'm leaning into this conversation. Actually, I'm really, this is,
I mean, there's so many things. Like, people think that they want to cover everything up. And I can tell you, a few weeks ago, I did an interview with my breast cancer doctor. And she said that the medical community is not being trained in the biopsychosocial. And she said, because we were talking about the emotional aspect of having cancer, and that's any kind of cancer, but also the trauma impacts. And she actually used the word trauma because it's still a trauma of any kind of cancer. But like when you talked about the emotional pieces of it, and it's like, and it's okay that men cry, and it's okay that men, I mean, just having the conversations around not stuffing down your feelings and talking about it is just it's hard. Because people who've gone through trauma numb their emotions. You ask somebody, Martin, they're going to say, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. They're not handling their emotions and they're numbing it. And someday those emotions are going to come out, or the trauma is going to come out somehow in their bodies, whether it's through rage, or maybe they're laying on the reformer and they're doing all kinds of, I don't know.
It's true. Well, if I could just say something to that, because we were talking about children earlier, this is my assumption when it comes to that sort of thing with emotions, and whether it's men, women, whatever. I treat people in that moment like they're my son or like one of my kids. And it's not that they don't necessarily want to show their emotion, it's that they don't have a vocabulary around their emotions.
Yes. But that's where but it starts with the parents. So if the dysregulated parent now has a child, and the child, the mother doesn't have, or the father doesn't have the language to teach that child, now you've got another generation of traumatized children coming into the world. And and Martin, I'm just going to say, I've developed children's programming around this kind of stuff for movement educators, for parents. So, and I don't talk about it a lot. So it's pulling all of my worlds together, essentially, is what I'm doing. But the bottom line is, it's still trauma, and it impacts children, their parents, and everybody else that goes behind the scenes. So, and it's going to be to different levels. So, all right, I'm going to push my chair back and try and be quiet.
But adding on to that piece, just because now we are in the trauma tornado right now. What Nikki says here, Body and Color, when her mom was in the hospital and people started looking at her funny, because we don't know how to handle our own trauma, we traumatize others when they're going through something. And, that whole piece of, somebody is sick, this is a massive blow to them because there's a person in their life that is important, special, whatever. And so, I mean, I've experienced it myself. We've known people who've gotten divorces who all of their friends pull away from them, or, heaven forbid, they lose a child, or hell, even your pet that you've been bonded with. People pull away rather than leaning in and supporting.
Yes.
And that's when we really, really should be thinking about how can we help this other person?
Well,
and helping other people heals us too. It
does. Absolutely, it does.
So,
there was a comment earlier in the scroll, and they were talking, and I want to comment because I think it's really important that reaching out and getting like names of people, like therapists.
Yes.
If you're working with somebody and saying, this is outside of my scope of practice, and referring to other people, because you know, I've built those links in my own community, but I mean, I realize that this is something I'm very adamant about, but just beginning to have conversations, and reaching out and just saying, you know, can I refer somebody to you? So I don't, it's, there's so many layers to it though. And that's why it's just, I appreciate you having this conversation, Martin, because it's so needed. And I'm sorry that you had to experience it, but I feel like you're going to be a catalyst in your community to bring awareness on a deeper level. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I'm dangerous. You know.
And Misty, I'm just going to say that, you know, when in talking with my doctor, because medical trauma is very real, and it ripples into the family members as well, and it's really, you know, and not, I mean, there's just so much, and it's like, that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm just saying that it's part of the, you know, the healing. I mean, we have to heal as well, but when somebody has gone through, I don't know, something traumatic, and and you don't talk about it, you know, they don't heal from it. So, but you have to, and that's the whole piece, you know.
Which is why this conversation should also go to people in the medical field. You know,
absolutely.
We have an assumption that our physicians kind of know what they're doing and have it all together, but, you know, they have pressures on them as well. Again, that desensitization piece, I think, is a big deal. And, you know, when your doctor says something like, oh, well, you have cancer, you've got 3 to 6 months, lots of luck to you, you know, that in and of itself is the type of thing that sends people into spirals that they don't get out of.
Yep.
Sure, we can address it in the Pilates studio through movement and all of these other things, but again, it's the web. The web has got to be coming together in a more sensible, sensitive way, not snowflake sensitive, but in the type of sensitivity that is warranted when somebody is going through something major. And that doesn't make anybody weak. It doesn't mean that you are not kind or just or whatever. All it's saying is, I am going to acknowledge that you, this other person in my sphere right now, is going through something, and I'm able to appreciate and accept that in our relatedness together right now. It doesn't have to be heavy lifting. You don't have to be a psychotherapist to make that acknowledgement. And we all need to be doing more to make sure that we show up.
Well, and I think too, it's like, I'm going to be honest, like a few weeks ago, and I did it on purpose, where I actually put out a post about breast cancer and I talked about medical trauma. And I think that it's, and because my focus during October was on breast cancer, but it goes across the board, and it's not just about cancer. It could be about any kind of illness, and how we approach people, and how we're non-judgmental. And there's just so many, having compassion, because we don't know what the other person is going through, is just so critically important. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Martin, thank you for sharing that. I don't necessarily know if your intention was to share what you experienced in your community, of course, because that's the way we roll here. But, you know, you've seen how many people in the chat have shared or hearted or thumbs up or whatever it is. And that's because, again, these are conversations that need to be had. And it just reminds us all that we're all living this human experience together. I know that it probably isn't easy to just sit and like digest what you went through, but I can tell you that hearing it and being able to relate to you allows us, the listeners, the viewers, the watchers, whatever, to see in places where massive trauma or something major comes up, where we can probably reflect a little better. So I thank you for sharing something that on your second day on the job was a lot.
Yeah.
Good. That's good. No, Thank you. I feel that's what we're here for, right? Just to put some color to the lived experience of others.
Yeah. Well, don't downplay it. It's a big deal. And yeah. So thank you.
So I would say that trauma-informed movement to me is going much broader. And that would be my hope. And so it's not just it's in the Pilates community and the movement community, but it really needs to be talked about on a much broader scale. So Martin, thank you. So
my pleasure. Yeah, we'll recycle this. Like, you'll see it everywhere, because some make good points. I'm gonna use it a lot, so it's good. It helped me to formulate a lot of what was going on and synthesize it. So this is good.
Well, I appreciate your acknowledging the work that that both Allie and I are doing, and I think it's not easy work to forge through, but it's something that's very much needed. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, my friends. Well, we'll continue these conversations offline, but we're gonna get cut off any moment here. So
have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
You.
And Missy, it was nice connecting with you again too. So thank you.
Twice in 1 week and another time in November. So it's coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Bye.
And we see you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Just a real quick shout out. Sorry, I see Nanette and Nikki and who else was here? Jamie, Fit for the Call, Dwayne.
The call is here.
Yeah, a few other people. So much.
Debbie.
Yes.
Lots of peeps.
Philip Griffin, Adrienne, Marianne just showed up too. Well, much love, everybody. And we'll be back at it next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.